Good day. I am Jay Perlman and the Vice President of Conferences for SSIT, the Society for the Social Implications of Technology. It's my great pleasure today to have with me Katina Michael from Arizona State University and Roba Abbas from the University of Wollongong, who are editorial members of the IEEE Transactions on Technology and Society. Katina is the founding editor-in-chief and Roba a co-editor of TTS, and they bring together diverse skill sets in information systems, computing, engineering, business, law, and society. The first volume of TTS was published in March 2020, so about a year and a half ago, and the content is highly transdisciplinary. But it's the human beings behind, and what I find fascinating is not only the journal itself and what they've done, the miracles they've created, but their broad backgrounds relative to the global humanitarian technology environment. Katina is a professor in the School for Future of Innovation in Society and the School of Computing and Augmented Intelligence at Arizona State. And I'm sure you'll see some of that background and influence in the discussions that we have. Roba is a lecturer and academic program director with the Faculty of Business and Law at the University of Wollongong. Roba's research interests include methodological approaches to complex socio-technical systems design, and by the way, includes robots and many other things that we find interesting in this conference. And with that, to the two of you, Katina and Roba, thank you for joining us. And let me turn the program over to you, Katina, to discuss the journal and how people can interact with it and with publications. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jay, on behalf of Roba and myself for that generous introduction. You have been at the outset of the development of these transactions from the day that idea was sown in the Board of Governors right through to its inception, and now its second year, almost the conclusion of that second year. And we are really proud. We've all worked so hard behind the scenes and also as the interface to the public, but we hold great hopes for the direction of these transactions of technology and society. Roba and I hope to spend about 20 minutes, maybe a little bit more, on the presentation proper, and then we'll open up to Q&A where we have backup slides where we may interact based on whatever is relevant to the audience in any facet of questions and comments and critiques and thoughts about the future of the transactions. So is the idea of technology and society new? This morning, I was very honored to have Professor Will DeBars, a research professor at ASU who works with President Michael Crow, talk on transdisciplinarity and looking at when the idea basically came into fruition in the modern world. And he traces it back mainly to the 1970s in an OECD conference at the University of Nice, whereby technology and society became a term understood within transdisciplinarity. Interestingly, the IEEE Society on the Social Implications of Technology has been looking at this theme a lot longer. And if we go back even further back into the 50s, into the 30s, I'm talking the 1900s here, we can start to begin to hear people talking about the need for interdisciplinarity to respond to global challenges. Challenges that were emerging, that were in the public interest. And while we have a lot of technical societies, we have one main society that encapsulates all of the IEEE's advancing humanity into this notion of technology and society. This translation space that requires fluency and mutual intelligibility. It's basically, how do we communicate? We've got the technologists on the one hand and society on the other. And is the world about engineering alone, or is it about interfacing with the people who are the lived experience, who are experts and designers in their own right, that are on the ground and understand their pain points and the reasons for their pains. And here at this conference, perhaps to stress the humanitarian aspect of it, being in situ, in diverse cultures and diverse settings with diverse economic systems, in fact, very different understandings of the world based on an orientation, a philosophical worldview, perhaps, a religious worldview, and so much more. So technology in society is not new, especially if we go back to the creation of things like fire, the making of the wheel, and what that has enabled over time, the printing press, and so much more. If we go back to the words of Norbert Wiener, who was not only a brilliant engineer, but also a brilliant mathematician and so much more. In fact, the father of cybernetics and the man who coined the term Kubernetes, we can see he was very much preoccupied with society, about the effects of his technological progress and what that would mean for the world in the future. As many of us know who have studied him, he refused to get engaged in matters of defense or perhaps of physical harm on anyone else. And so for that reason, he forwent so much of the funding that would have came to him as an MIT professor. And what we have in his example is perhaps the rise of responsible innovation. Be careful what you build. You are responsible for its effects, that which we call today social implications. And on the other hand, we also had sociologists like Jacques Ellul talking about the fact that we may be able to resolve one problem with a technology response, but that could potentially create further difficulties. And so this sort of domino effect, we solve one problem, we create another. And he has gone on video in the 90s talking about, well, what if we created autonomous vehicles and it solved the problem of fatalities? What would happen to those people who required vital organs because of decay in their body? For example, a heart replacement or something else. And so he was saying, it's great, you know, we'll have less fatalities, but will we? Who will not benefit as we look at this sensitive and ethical dilemma. And so if we go to our Wikipedia page, that which was created for us, we can look at the Society on the Social Implications of Technology, very much a sister society, I would say, to the Humanitarian Technology Group, and also IEEE Ethics and so many others that don't belong to sort of a specific technological field. But we look at both the positive and negative effects. It's not just to postulate that technologies can have unintended consequences that can negatively impact humans. What about those benefits and even those unexpected and unanticipated benefits? What about those positive uses? And today we've coined the term public interest technology to talk about the ways we can use technology to respond to the public interest in the most beneficial way possible. But there is also a social and economic responsibility to this. It's not just looking at society, but how will we keep, in terms of public interest technology, a sustainable economic yield from that which we redirect our attention to, for example, global warming, energy crises around the world, poverty, and so much more that is mentioned in the Sustainable Development Goals. And again, to say, despite the term transdisciplinarity being born out of that OECD conference in Nice, what we have is also the Committee on Social Implications of Technology, the precursor to SSIT, actually being established in 1972, and we still have their letters archived, and we celebrate, I think, 50 years next year. And so here's the panoply of publications and conference flagship events we have, just like HTC. On the left, you can see the Technology and Society magazine, presently being edited-in-chief by Professor Jeremy Pitt of Imperial College London, someone who's very espoused in data and governance and multi-agent systems and collective awareness and solving those bigger problems through his intelligent systems work, looking at democracy by design, for example. And we'll hear from Jeremy next week on the 27th at his AI for Equality workshop. Still, we have some open positions if anyone wishes to participate free of charge. Following on from that day, on the 28th next week, we have the International Symposium on Technology and Society, ISTAS, which has had about 30 or so conferences, as I've been able to pull through conferences official into the 90s and beyond. And that is really about bringing as many different stakeholders together, people from industry, people from government, people, of course, from academia, engineering, private enterprise, not-for-profits, and non-government organizations. And that is a platform by which also students in particular can gain their first exposure to the potential of publishing in SSIT's various fronts. On the right-hand side, our 2-year-old volume now on Transactions on Technology and Society, which is growing from strength to strength, and we'll talk about that as we go through this presentation. Here's an example of our current issue, one that I'm very proud of, that was guest edited by myself and Dr. Roba Abbas, Eusebio Scornavaca, and Jason Sargent, where we look at the techno-economic fallout. And if we anticipate that and redirect our attention to purpose-driven socio-technical innovation, how might that benefit us? And this is a collection of best papers, I use that term loosely, from ISTAS last year that have been strengthened through peer review and also published in a different way than they were in the ISTAS proceedings. So more than 30% of that paper is different. But you can see that what we were driving here for is to ask the question, what about purpose-driven socio-technical innovation? Something I think all of our friends at the GHTC understand very well given their work and focus. So on my last slide that I'm presenting, the history and growth, Jay mentioned we began in March 2020. It's a quarterly journal, it's online only, and we go to preprint immediately after the paper has been accepted and individuals have read their proof. It goes straight to preprint as it's waiting for a volume number and issue number. And usually that lead time is between 3 and 6 months. We envisage that might be longer into the future as we get an acceptance rate which is lower, in fact, as more people find out about us as a potential outlet for publication, and also that we appeal to a growing community. We started off with only 200 pages, which didn't really make us eligible to garner an impact factor in the first 3 years. You do need about 24 full papers to be published in an annual year to be considered for 3 years in a row before you can get an impact factor. But we are growing really quickly. We've exceeded 60 pages from our original hope for 2022. And beyond that, we will be growing even more. So we're very happy with all of this positive progress. And over to you now, Roba.
Thank you, Katina. Thank you, Jay, also, and to the conference organisers for providing us with this forum to share information about the transactions. I'll spend a few moments talking about the scope of the transactions and its inter, multi, and transdisciplinary focus. In terms of scope, we publish research papers that explore, as Katina mentioned, the intersection of technology, science, and society, with the emphasis or an emphasis on the impact of interactions within socio-technical systems. And those are impacts at the individual, business or industry or societal level. We also welcome work on ethical, professional and social responsibility in practice or in the practice of science, technology, engineering and mathematics, providing an outlet for open discussion of the ensuing issues. On the following slide, we can see the scope and areas of coverage, noting the significance of that transdisciplinary lens in particular. This transdisciplinarity can be encouraged given that we are one of the few transactions, as Katina mentioned, in the IEEE that crosses the technical and non-technical domains. Additionally, we're not solely focused on one technology, domain or discipline. Rather, we encourage inter, multi and transdisciplinary work with research papers that address both social and technical factors. And the idea here is that the research papers submitted to the transactions are accessible to a general readership rather than specialists in a particular technology, domain, or discipline. Coverage, for example, as you can see, could include research into emerging technologies, STEM education, artificial intelligence and robotics, medical or health informatics, social impact and implications, ethics, law and regulation, economics, work and innovation, and also social responsibility, and for the purposes of this conference, humanitarian technology. Next, we have some details about our editorial team, committees, and various boards. So the Transactions is led by founding editor-in-chief, Professor Katina Michael, who also served as the editor-in-chief of the IEEE Technology and Society magazine for over 5 years, ending in 2017. Furthermore, there are 5 co-editors representing the fields of business, information systems, engineering, and more. In addition to myself, we have co-editors, Professors Rafael Calvo, George Roussos, Eusebio Scornavaca, and Samuel Fosso Wamba. We also have over 70 colleagues working with us, professionals who we've brought on from both industry and academia that are active and prominent in their own right in the technology and society space, ranging from technologists, engineers, and philosophers, in addition to many other specializations. And these individuals assume various roles, and they make up our steering committee, editorial board, and publications board. Something that we really wanted to focus on and provide some, an overview of is our rigorous peer review process, which is shown on the next slide. We've highlighted here, in the interest of transparency, the stages from initial submission of a manuscript as it moves through to the formal peer review process and then makes its way back to the author for an official decision. So upon submission of a manuscript to the author portal, the link of which is provided on your screen, the paper is cross-checked using a similarity index whereby not more than 30% similarity is permitted. When the manuscript has passed this initial check, and we've certainly experienced cases of plagiarism where papers do not clear this check, it then goes through an admin and EIC approval process, after which it's assigned to one of our co-editors, so a relevant co-editor on the basis of suitability to adjudicate. At that point, the respective co-editor reviews the paper and initiates the formal peer review process, where most papers go through at least 3 rounds of reviews. In this review stage, recommended reviews are considered, but not always utilised by the co-editors, and we generally endeavour to return to original reviewers in subsequent review rounds, although sometimes this is not always possible. The reviews return to the co-editor after that particular formalised review process, who then provides a recommendation for or decision for EIC consideration, after which the authors are notified of the decision relating to their manuscript. Upon acceptance, the final files and copyright related transfers are requested, and concluding the process. So this end-to-end process that's represented on your screen, as Katina mentioned, can take anywhere between 3 and 6 months, although there are situations that may deviate from this time frame. With respect to the types of articles, on the next screen, we've listed the 2 types that are considered for publication, both of which fall under original research. The regular article uses the IEEE Transactions template and may be up to 10 pages. And this is inclusive of the content, references, acknowledgements, biographies, images, and also the tables. Manuscripts that do exceed this 10-page limit will incur a page charge. In terms of the second type of article, which is titled a brief type, this utilizes a different template. It is generally anywhere between 2 to 5 pages, although officially specified as 2 pages. This is again inclusive of all your content, references, acknowledgements, biographies, images, and tables. And 3 of those additional pages beyond the 2-page limit do not incur any additional page charges or a page charge. On the next slide, we thought it would be important to discuss some elements around desk rejections, and we've included 2 valuable resources that identify tips and techniques that aid in the development of a quality manuscript that ideally would pass a desk review process. We recommend these articles as they pinpoint aspects that are aligned with our experience of desk rejection processes, or the desk rejection process in general, which, as noted in both articles, can be quite frustrating and unpleasant, both from the perspective of the author and the journal editors and administrators. To give you an idea, some of the reasons for desk rejections that are aligned with our experience in transactions that are noted by Dwabedi et al. In a recent article include the inconsistency with the aims or scope of the journal, a lack of novelty or significance, and reasons related to structure, to methodology, plagiarism and self-plagiarism, and a lot more. And similarly, there's been an article on your screen which provides tips identified by my University of Wollongong colleague, Professor John Billsbury, that include ensuring your manuscript is directly within the scope of the journal, that the manuscript makes a significant and strong contribution to existing scholarship, as well as things to do with format, language, and a range of other factors. In terms of going back to the transactions on the next slide for a moment, and specifically to provide some examples of research that fall directly within the scope of the transactions, we have a number of special issues that are open at the moment. The details of the corresponding call for paper are shown on this slide, so we'll just go through them for a moment. The first, that has a closing date of the 1st of December 2021, is titled After COVID-19, Crises, Ethics and Socio-Technical Change. The guest editorial team for this special is led by Professor Raphael Calvo from Imperial College London. And the second call is on the theme of socio-technical ecosystems considerations, threats and opportunities for AI and cybersecurity. And this is led by Oxford University's Professor Tadeo. And the closing date for submissions is early next year on the 1st of February. Finally, before we go to questions, we note the process for submitting a special issue for those of you who are interested for consideration by our board. A proposal is typically 4 to 5 pages in length and is submitted containing a number of elements, and they include the provision of a working title for the special, details of the guest editors, typically with international standing, noting their affiliation and also providing some kind of evidence of track record. The theme of the special issue must have a global appeal and take into account gender equity, geographic diversity, and much more. And other details include the provision of an abstract and corresponding description, an overview of the topicality and significance of the theme of the special, also establishing the need for the theme, which is usually evidenced through an assessment or a review of current scholarship, and a suitable and extensive bibliography which is appended to that. And lastly, details of potential author and reviewers to be approached as part of that process. And that's all from me. We welcome any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Comments and thoughts from the audience, reflections they might want to share with us. I'll leave that open to you. So an average length of a paper would be between 8 and 10 pages. But yes, that acceptance rate is quite low. It's not to discourage people. I think it's something to get feedback from a global outlet like ours.
So in order to submit a special issue for consideration, the idea is to develop a 4 to 5 page proposal, some elements of which are included on your slide. So generally we ask for a title of the special issue, the details of your guest editorial team that you propose or put forward, in addition to some literature review, perhaps pointing to some methodological and other gaps that I guess warrant further consideration, that identify gaps in current scholarship or in current research, and allow us to really identify this as a pressing area of global appeal that takes into account, as I mentioned earlier, things around gender equity and geographic diversity. So the structure of the proposal for special issue would be the title, the guest editors, the theme itself, the background information in terms of bibliography and that overview that I mentioned. Significance is also quite important, but that could be inbuilt into that overview that you provide, and also potential authors that you have in mind. So whether you'd be presenting this call or approaching certain societies or presenting this call at particular conferences, for example, and also some of the reviewers you have in mind that would be appropriate to form part of your reviewer pool for the special issue. And you can certainly send that through to the editorial team, and we'll have a look and sort of flag any other details that might be required and formalize that process. We do have inbuilt within our system, once that call for papers does get accepted and is distributed, we do have mechanisms for identifying additional reviewers as well. So there'll be some kind of assistance and infrastructure around that, but the initial framework and the structure for your call for proposal is sort of defined on your end.
Katina and Robert, thank you very much. There were a number of questions that were left unanswered, and perhaps we can continue the dialogue on another occasion. And thank you for the GHTC for inviting this, and your suggestions of perhaps some collaboration were intriguing, and we hope we can follow that up with you. Thank you all.